Hi, everybody. I'm Dixon,
And I'm Jose.
and welcome to the April 2022 episode of Southwest Side Stories. We've got a really interesting conversation today with somebody who is the project lead. His name's Mark for the LeClaire Courts redevelopment project, which is promising to be a big initiative here on the Southwest side. If folks are not familiar with LeClaire Courts, it was a low rise public housing project along Cicero Avenue and immediately to the west, just off of the I 55 exit. So, if a lot of people are familiar with it, it may be because they drove past it on the way to Midway Airport. They're dropping somebody off, they're picking somebody up, and they're going past LeClaire Courts on the way to and from Midway. But in addition to that, it was a tight knit community that existed for decades. Jose, you lived in the nearby vicinity of LeClaire Courts for a while. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, my family moved to the area around 2007, down Cicero Avenue. We lived past 47th Street, but to your point, it was getting off I-55 and there was like clear ports, every time. The buildings came down in the early 2000s, like you said, and but my mom actually worked at Hearst Elementary, which was nearby, has since kind of been a hybrid charter school, and I'm just kind of really curious how the new development is going to be impacting the community there once it gets going.
Yeah, and we've seen the plans that the developers have put out there. They've had a couple of public meetings, and we'll get into that in the interview itself. But two main features, in addition to the residential units that are going in, are a federally qualified health center and a grocery store. And those have been sorely lacking in the community, specifically the community in the immediate vicinity of LeClaire Courts. And as you mentioned, the buildings, have been demolished for a while now. So it is essentially empty space at this point, and the plans are to, build up a community on that spot again.
Yeah, definitely healthcare center amazingly direly needed in the area, and it's really a little ironic and great, but also sad that it's been a food desert for so long, and now the it took the public project housing to go down for a major grocer to come in. But I know that that grocer will be having an impact on the community that is still there and attending Hearst Elementary. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about how aware the developer is about these dynamics and how they're rectifying Chicago's history.
All right. So we are here with Mark Kirincich, who is the project lead on the LeClaire Courts redevelopment project, which is an exciting project that is coming to the southwest side of Chicago. LeClaire Courts was, of course, a public housing project that existed on Cicero Avenue, just south of I 55 and a little bit west of Cicero for many decades, was demolished a little over a decade ago, and there is a redevelopment project planned and in the works. So, to start off, I wonder, can you describe the project? What is planned for the site of the old LeClaire Courts?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us, Dixon. We're excited to be part of the program and also, enjoy sharing what we're working on. Um, the overall project is a really comprehensive mixed use, mixed income redevelopment effort. Might have to go back a little bit in time to give you a little background, but I think it was 2018, the Chicago Housing Authority, which owns the land, issued an RFP, and we were one of the respondents. And then ultimately in 2019, were awarded the redevelopment opportunity. Um, we've teamed up with another entity, the Habitat Company, which is a major housing redevelopment and developer in the Chicagoland area, and they're a 50-year-old company. They've been around obviously a long time, and they're throughout Chicago and the Midwest. Um, so once we won the award, we really started, digging in to figure out what we could do there. And the idea is to really kind of enhance the community. As you know, that it's been a disinvested area for a long time. And our focus is to create a mixed use, mixed income community over time. And if you think about, you know, if you think about all the things that define community, there are, we could debate that, right? It's been debated for generations, but from our perspective, there are a number of things that are really, really important. One is housing, two is food, three is healthcare, and four is jobs. And that's what I think starts a sustainable and thriving community. And so we worked very hard with a number of community organizations in the Southwest side to try to come up with ideas. And we had many of our own, and then they've been enhanced over the last couple of years as we've talked to people. As of today, we plan somewhere between 650 and 700 units of multifamily mixed income housing. And that is a combination of CHA housing, affordable units, and market rate units. And they will be indistinguishable from one another in terms of units. So a one bedroom unit will be a one bedroom unit, regardless of who the tenant might be. There'll be a mix of studio, one and two bedrooms in our first phase. And in subsequent phases, there will be a mix of more family sized units to reflect the demographic of the environment and the neighborhood. And then we currently have interest, and we're negotiating a formal lease, and we're actually doing architectural drawings for a 50,000 square foot federally qualified healthcare center at the corner of 44th and Cicero. That would be on the north corner of that location. And then just north of that, we have a 60,000 square foot full service grocer that we're out to lease with right now to work on that. We've been working with them for over a year. And the healthcare provider we've been working with literally since we put our RFP application in with the CHA. So our first phase will be 190 units of mixed income housing between 44th and 45th fronting Cicero. And then a full service grocer and a full service federally qualified healthcare provider also fronting Cicero.
So you described a couple of components there, and all pretty important, obviously. I want to concentrate on the housing component for a moment.
Sure.
Because you mentioned a couple of terms that I think get thrown around. You said the CHA housing, the affordable housing, and I think it was the market rate housing. But sometimes people hear those terms and are not exactly sure what they mean. So can you define those a little bit?
Well, CHA housing is obviously that. It's public housing, and it's people with CHA contracts that and then because this was a CHA site and they had former residents on it, there are a number of right of return residents by federal law, that have the right to move back to that location because they were displaced when CHA tore them down to start over again. And so there are a number of those units. The number we are required under our development agreement to build is 186 of those units out of a total of, let's say, 700-ish. So it's not a huge number. It's not going to be what it was at the time, which was 100% public housing. And then affordable housing is anywhere between 60% and 80% or 100% of area median income. So it's affordable housing under federal guidelines, and it's driven by tax credits that are issued by the federal government to help ease the housing shortages that we have throughout the country. And then market rate is just that. It's your average everyday go look for an apartment, and that's what you find.
Another question I had, and I think this is something that's on the mind of a lot of people who think about public housing and the history of public housing, is, it gets built and it looks really good at the beginning and then is not maintained over time. That's just kind of the history of how, public housing in the city and across the country has not been maintained. So what is the maintenance plan in terms of making sure that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, these units are maintained and continue to be in good condition?
The way the tax credit allocation and financing structures work, there are very stringent requirements for reserve requirements for building maintenance and upkeep, and that those requirements have changed over time as a result of what you just referred to. We had issues. Thinking, you think about some of the was it Henry Horner homes and obviously Cabrini Green and obviously LeClaire Courts went, had significant deferred maintenance and other issues. So there have been significant changes. And on top of that, building design, building envelope, construction techniques have changed dramatically since those units were built back in the 50s and 60s. So, and then on top of that, we have a housing partner in the Habitat Company, who, as I mentioned earlier, has been doing it for 50 years, and they're very well regarded, and they have very rigorous maintenance and improvement programs in place. So, I mean, I know that that's a concern. I'll be honest, that's the least of my concerns, because I know the regulations and the style of the way we operate and the way the Habitat Company operates, we won't have that issue.
Okay, so we talked about the housing itself, and you mentioned a couple of other, key components of the phase one of this project. And one of those was the federally qualified health center. So just, off the bat, for those who don't know, what is a federally qualified health center and what role will it play both for residents who are moving into these new units and residents throughout the community?
I'm not going to give you the exact formal definition of a federally qualified healthcare center, but I'm going to give you the layman's version, which is my version. They are entities that provide healthcare, and they can do it regardless of insurance or regardless of ability to pay. And they do it without any discrimination of gender or economic status or racial status. The healthcare provider we're talking about has been in Chicago since the 80s. They're very well regarded, and they're already known in the community. I can't announce them, I'm sorry, and nor can I announce the grocer, but they're both high quality. For the healthcare provider, they intend to provide, prenatal through elder care. They're looking at adding a dental component, which they already have in other locations. We're planning a pharmacy on site. There's also a partnership with another major hospital system that will add imaging, so that if you need to get a CAT scan or some other imaging, you don't have to go all the way downtown to get it. You'll be able to get it in the neighborhood where healthcare is needed. So we're really excited about the healthcare offering and what it's going to provide for the neighborhood, not just for, as you said, for new residents, but for the entire community.
Yeah.
And it's going to be at 44th and Cicero. It'll be accessible via public transportation and driving. And we're really excited, and we're knee deep in design drawings right now.
I think one part that you mentioned there, offering health services without regard to insurance status. And I know there are federally qualified health centers on the Southwest side that offer health services without regard to citizenship status as well. And both of those are critically important, because there are a lot of people who do not have health insurance, who have health insurance that has significant co-payments and gaps in it. And there are people who are undocumented. So hearing that, that's what federally qualified health centers do, and those are the services that are provided is I think, pretty crucial. Absolutely, having access to healthcare through a healthcare facility is crucial for people's health, but having access to fresh food is also, essential for people's health. So the grocery component, I wanted to ask about that as well, because you mentioned that it was high. It was number one on a lot of people's lists. And I live pretty close to the Pulaski exit on I-55. So one exit away from Cicero, where the old LeClaire Courts site was. And I can walk to Pete's Fresh Market and Aldi, and there's a Target that has a grocery in it as well.
Right.
So you could see that one stop on the expressway, you really have your pick of grocers, and I can go further south and there's even more.
Right.
But you go over to Cicero and there's not a whole lot.
Right.
There's not a grocer for, I'd have to think really hard to think of where the closest is. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the need for that and bringing that as part of this project.
Well, I mean, again, we looked at what makes a community, and we listened to the community as we talked to people. And, that was the one thing they said, we kind of have to leave our neighborhood area to go to get food. And, you know, so we really wanted to focus on that effort and trying to find a grocer that would be able to market to the community, and be offer the goods and services and the selection that the community deserves. I mean, it's not really what this community deserves; it's what every community deserves. I mean, everybody deserves quality, affordable groceries. I mean, it's just you need to be able to have a selection, and that's what we've put together.
Yeah.
And so we're excited. The grocer is a regional player. They're not, a single person operation. They're a regional player. They're well known. You'll recognize them immediately. And I think you'll be pleased with what the offerings will be.
You mentioned community engagement, and I think that's a really crucial part of this as well. So there are existing communities that are nearby the old LeClaire Courts site. There's a lot of single family housing that's immediately to the south and west of Cicero. There's the Sleepy Hollow community, which is across Cicero to the east. And there's the community around Bidham Park, which is south of 47th Street. So can you talk a little bit about, how you envision the project being integrated with those existing communities and what kind of outreach you did to people who are living in the immediate vicinity?
Okay. Absolutely. We started our community outreach formally, and I'm going to look at my cheat sheet, on May 30th of 2019. So here we are in April of 2022. And we have been working with Alderman Rodriguez. Well, first, let me start with this. There are, as you mentioned, a lot of different community groups and stakeholders here. Number one, Chicago Housing Authority, they own the land. And, we're a development partner with them and the Habitat Company. The Chicago Housing Authority has their own working group, and that is made up of Alderman Rodriguez. It's made up of right of return residents. It's made up of Joanne Williams from the Hearst organization, because she's immediately adjacent, and she is a former LeClaire Courts resident. She's been in the neighborhood, I think, something like 45 years. And so there's that. And then obviously you have mentioned Bidham Park, Archer Heights, Sleepy Hollow, the Hearst organization, Garfield Ridge. And we have reached out to every one of those organizations through one organization or another, whether it's through the Gateway to Midway Committee, which then has many representatives from each of those groups as part of that, or the Garfield Ridge Chamber of Commerce, which not just ties into the businesses, but also the neighborhoods, the Hearst Community Organization. So we've really tried to be in the community and make sure that we're tapping all viewpoints. I mean, nobody's perfect, and I'm not going to say we have been, but from starting May of 2019, by my count right now, we're at 24 different community group meetings and impacts. We had one as recent as Tuesday night where AGC, the Academy for Global Citizenship, which you're aware of, is building a brand new charter school on land immediately west of where we are building. It was formerly part of the CHA site, but they sold off that piece to AGC. They had a job fair on Tuesday night in the neighborhood, and we were there participating in the hopes that if they're successful in bringing in local hires and starting apprenticeships, then since we're a little behind them in terms of getting started, once they finish there, they might be able to jump right into where we're at and continue on to build a career. And then we'll be doing the same kind of outreach from a job fair perspective um, as well. I mean, we'll probably be doing that. My guess is in the next 60 days, we'll start that process. So, um, and then, then there's obviously, opportunities to speak with folks like yourself. Um, we want to be engaged in the community, and we have on our Cabrera Capital website, we have a lot of information and a number of um, Zoom meetings we had during the depth of the pandemic that were, some were attended by 200 plus participants. We've had multiple of those. Again, Alderman Rodriguez has been instrumental in trying to do that. We've done them in Spanish as well as English. We've had some uh, directly translated on at the time, or in others we've had them translated separately with a separate, Spanish speaking deck. So we've tried to be inclusive. Again, I'm sure we can do better, but to the extent we can, we want to be engaged in the community. That's the only way we're going to make this successful, is if the community agrees with what we're trying to do and is a proponent of what we're trying to do.
LeClaire Courts, the old site, was demolished a little bit more than 10 years ago, but it stood for decades before that. There was a very close knit community. So when you look back at the original LeClaire Courts housing project, what lessons do you take in terms of things that you want to preserve that were done right, or mistakes that you don't want to repeat?
I think, when you look at the history and you talk to the people who've lived there over the years, um, the the fondness that remains for that community. And if you go back and look at history, when this was originally occupied, when LeClaire Courts was originally occupied, it was considered a model public housing site in the country. Everybody wanted to live there. It was diverse in terms of its population. It was very diverse. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with what was built. I think it was built for its time and it served its purpose. I think that over time, it probably got neglected. And I mean, I can't speak to the maintenance of what it was because I wasn't involved in it at all until 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, when had already been torn down. But based on the history we've all read or experienced, there were some less than positive things at the end, and unfortunately, that's what a lot of the current community remembers. But the many folks who lived there and families who grew up there and raised kids there have extremely fond memories of LeClaire Courts. And we want to be able to create that kind of diverse environment where people can barbecue together, grill out on the back, in the open area, go to school together, work together, play together, and be a community. And that's what I think LeClaire Courts was in its heyday, and that's what we would like to help recreate today.
I thought that was an interesting conversation. We talked a lot about the upcoming redevelopment, which is going to be breaking ground in the very near future. The residential units will be breaking ground in the spring of 2023, and the commercial developments will be breaking ground a little bit before that, the health center and the grocer. What were some of the main takeaways from the interview for you, Jose?
It was nice to get a lot of clarity, from the developer directly about how much community input and considerations were taken, like these public housing to private development transitions can be pretty rough in Chicago's history. I know that one of my professors, that was pretty, had a big influence on me in urban planning when I was studying that, got their start with the Cabrini Green housing. And that was an unfortunate project that we saw. Kind of the housing project was a destined to fail because of the way it was handled, and it led to a lot of luxury development speculation. That has not been the case here, and that is kind of nice to see. There's going to be a lot more amenities geared towards maintaining the community that has been here, displaced here, and could be coming back.
Yeah, I think it's interesting and it's important to understand the history of public housing in Chicago. And we actually did a tour earlier this year with the Chicago historian Dilla, and he talked a little bit about LeClaire Courts. And I want to just play a clip from that tour so we can understand a little bit better the history of the area.
Think of your house now. What kind of bathroom do you have if you don't replace it every 10, 15 years? No bathroom was replaced in the LeClaire Courts in its entirety of being built, right? So if your sink broke, we would come fix your sink. But there was no, you got pipes in there from the 50s, it's 1985, let's just gut none of that. In the natural course of your house, you're going to change out your bathroom and kitchen, right? Technology is going to occur, your sub pump, your whatever. Things are going to occur to make you change and update your housing space. And that's what keeps it standing. These places were constructed of brick. I got a brick bungalow. You got some problems if you don't tuck point. Little to no tuck pointing occurred in any of the housing projects across the city. But then I also think about warmth of environment. A lot of times concrete floors for spaces like this. My wife thinks that I'm a puppy or something. I love sleeping on the floor, right? We got a wood floor, put a blanket there, a pillow. Sometimes I like play. That's my cheat with the kids. I just crawl in their room and sleep on the floor, and they think I'm playing with them. They jumping all off me and on me. I'm sneaking a nap in. I'm thinking, how is that on a concrete floor though, right?
I really appreciated that he Dylan knows so much, like the nuances, but of what Cha was dealing with in terms of the housing stock and what it went to maintaining it, and how you see that there was imposed harsh conditions in some aspects with the longevity that the units went without service, and even then not being built to optimal standards in some cases. That was definitely the case with Cabrini Green, and I know that Lathrop Homes was a redevelopment that got started, as public housing because of its proximity to the river being a detriment. And as plans for the river changed, that real estate became much more valuable. Um, you know, uh, so that's not been the case with LeClaire Courts. Like I really appreciate how the tour highlighted that its proximity to Midway Airport was always kind of a factor that went into the community there. I definitely enjoyed that day, and I think that we need to do more of those.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so I think it all ties together. One of the things that that Mark said during the interview that really stuck out to me was he said that the redevelopment project, is only going to be successful if the community is on board. And from my point of view, the community is only going to be on board to the extent that the community is able to shape what the project looks like. And it seems like they've done outreach and they've had public hearings and public meetings that we've been a part of, but we certainly encourage people to participate in those, especially if you live in the communities immediately adjacent to the old LeClaire Courts site, especially if you used to live in the LeClaire Courts community, and you are a right to return resident. This is a project that you should have a significant voice in. So we'll be encouraging that. We'll be encouraging community feedback and community being able to shape the project, and we'll see how things go.